Today's episode is brought to you by Patreon. If you're interested in supporting the show, go to patreon.com/JoshuaVelas and become a $2 backer today and get early access to the new episodes. I'll be leaving a link in the description down below, but for now, on to today's episode. You're listening to the Augment Experience podcast. I'm your host, as usual, Joshua Velas. I'm a student, musician, and a gamer at heart. Join me as I sit down every week to talk about all the latest news in the technology, business, and video game world. I hope you guys enjoy. All right, everybody, welcome back to the show. My name is Joshua Velas. I am your host, as usual, and obviously, welcome back to the show. Today is episode 75 of the show, so now we are basically 3/4 of the way to 100 episodes, which, that's incredible. Obviously, you guys know that today is the Friday episode, and yes, I will apologize again because this wasn't the scheduled talk that we were going to have today. Obviously, as you guys know, I was already planning on doing a episode with the AirPods Pro with one of my friends, but, you know, due to scheduling issues, we had to push it for next week, but that's fine, because luckily, there was other tech news that happened during this week, and I know you guys are, and to be honest, I have a lot of thoughts about this one because I'm a little bit conflicted, especially because at first I was like, okay, where does this thing land? How do I feel about it? And I thought about it. Like, I spent the week talking about it with people. I've had multiple discussions breaking down, is it worth it? And if I start beating around the bush for a little bit, we're talking about the Mac Pro, because obviously the Mac Pro finally came out this week, and a lot of people are really interested about this thing because, well, one, mostly because of the price, but even in terms of performance-wise, because it's a pretty hefty piece of equipment, if I'm being honest. And I know what you guys are asking is like, Josh, where do you stand in this situation, And I think it's weird, because I'm somewhere in the middle. I'm somewhere that's torn, because it's like, on one hand, do I believe this machine is for me? No, I do not believe it's anywhere near for me. Nowhere. For most YouTubers, do I think it's beneficial to most YouTubers? Probably not. Still, to a degree, depending on the YouTuber, and if they're working with 8K cameras and big footage and even like that, even then, this thing is still overkill for most people's workloads, if we're being honest. And for the actual professionals, yes, this machine is made for them, but it's still overkill. Because I think that's the whole trend that I've noticed with this machine is no matter who uses it, it's overkill. It's super overkill for everyone's workload. Even though, yes, those of us that build computers and are very tech savvy, we know that, yes, a lot of the parts inside of it, we can probably build something with the same parts for much, much cheaper. But let's talk about it, because I know everybody wants to talk about this thing because there's a lot to talk about. So, in terms of the specifications, obviously, yes, since this is a desktop and a professional workstation, this obviously is going to have multiple configurations, multiple parts, and starting with the processor, so you can go from an 8-core up to a 28-core, actually. It's an Intel Xeon W, and obviously the 8-core version starts at 3.5, goes up to 3.5 gigahertz, 8-core, 16 threads, turbo clocks to 4 gigahertz, 24.5 megabytes of cache, so most of you probably don't even know what that means, but, and obviously we go all the way up to the max version, which is the 28 core that starts at 2.5 gigahertz, goes up, which is 28 cores, 56 threads, boost up to 4.4 gigahertz, 66.5 megabytes of cache, and supports up to 33 megahertz memory, so that's RAM. We go up to the RAM, and this is where a lot of people started going like crazy, because that's super overkill. So obviously the base configuration is 32 gigabytes of RAM, which is 4 sticks of 8. And then it goes up to 1.5 terabytes of RAM. And oh my God, that's crazy. And obviously this is all DDR4, so let's keep that in mind. But 1.5 terabytes, like, you wouldn't imagine how many tabs you can keep open in Chrome. Like, Chrome is probably, like, I saw somebody make a joke about this on Twitter. They were like, Chrome treats this thing like tonight we feast because there's so much RAM, which is 12.6 of 128, which is insane. But you can only get the 1.5 terabytes if you buy the 24 core or the 28 core processor. So now, obviously, when we go up to it, we got the graphics cards. And this is where it becomes a little bit interesting because you can have, it says you can have up to configure 2 MPX modules with up to 4 GPUs. And the GPUs you have the options are the AMD Radeon Pro 580X, which, standard little card. Not the best, but, and obviously we go up to the new card they added, which is the AMD Radeon Pro Vega 2 Duo. And what this is the 2 Vega 2 GPUs, each with 64 compute units and 4,096 stream processors, 64 gigabytes of HBM2 memory, 32 gigabytes per GPU, each with 1 terabyte per second memory bandwidth, up to 28.3 teraflops single precision or 56.6 teraflops half precision. Onboard Infinity Fabric Link connection connects to 2 Vega GPUs up to 84 gigabytes per second. They have 4 Thunderbolt 3 ports and 1 HDMI 2.0 port on the card. 4 DisplayPort connections routed to system to support internal Thunderbolt 3 ports. Support for up to 8 4K displays, 4 5K displays, or 4 Pro Display XDRs, which we'll talk about the Pro Display as well because it has to be lumped in there. So, and obviously it says full height MPX module files with an MPX bay and uses extra power and bandwidth. The power supply is a 1400 kilowatt powers, or not kilowatt, 1.4 kilowatts, but obviously in terms of watts, it'd be 1,400 watts. So that's a lot of power. And obviously you can hear my mouse in the background too because I'm using my computer for this one because it's a lot to go over. Then obviously we have the expansion slots. So we have 8 PCI Express expansion slots. So, that's crazy. I don't really need to go into detail about that. That's just insane. Obviously 3 full-length PCI Gen 3 slots, blah, blah, blah. And then we have the Afterburner card, which this is a new thing Apple added into it, which what it's specifically for is ProRes and ProRes RAW accelerator card. That's what it is. And it's a PCI Express X16 card. It accelerates ProRes and ProRes RAW codecs in Final Cut Pro, QuickTime Player X, and supported third-party apps. Supports system playback raw up to 6 streams of 8K ProRes RAW or up to 23 streams of 4K ProRes RAW. So obviously this is for video editors that are working with 8K files or a lot of 4K footage. This card is going to help increase the processor, especially if you're used to using Final Cut Pro and or depending on what those third-party apps are. I'm assuming the Adobe Suite is going to be in there, but I digress. The storage, obviously you can configure up to 8 terabytes of SSD storage. So these are SSD, so definitely much better than hard drives. So obviously the base configuration is 256 gigabyte of an SSD, all the way up to 8 terabytes, which are 2 4 terabyte modules, up to 3.4 gigabytes per second sequential read, and 3.4 gigabytes sequential write performance. Storage is encrypted by the Apple T2 security chip, which obviously is on board for security. In terms of your input and outputs, you have an input-output card installed in the half-length X4 PCI Express slot with 2 USB 3.0 ports, 2 USB 3 ports, support for USB-A up to 5 gigabytes per second, 2 Thunderbolt 3 ports, so that means support for Thunderbolt 3 up to 40 gigabytes per second, support for USB Type-C up to 10 gigabytes, and then support for DisplayPort, and then two 10 gigabyte Ethernet ports, so support for 10 gigabyte Ethernet performance over copper cabling, and then support for N-based T industry standard 1 gigabyte, 2.5 gigabytes, 5 gigabytes, 10 gigabyte Ethernet link speed using RJ45 connectors. That's a lot. And obviously you have additional connections, blah, 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 audio, inputs, and, stuff like that. And overall, on the specs, this thing's a monster. Just an absolute monster is what this thing is. It's absurd. This thing it's crazy. In paper, it's really crazy. Now, when we start talking pricing, this is where where a lot of people start getting the memes from, because obviously if you wanted a fully maxed out version, as I'm currently doing right now, just going through, I'm just going through right now and just putting everything, because there's some limitations because the 8 terabyte storage is not available, and there's also some graphics card options that are not available. And when we go into it, obviously, if you want the wheels on the rig, you got to spend an extra $400. You know, and if you also want like the mouse pad and everything, which we're just gonna say no. And if you want the software as well. So just for the maxed out model, you know, maxed out everything, you're looking at $52,199. And clearly, that's a lot of money for a computer, because it's a lot of money. Clearly. We're not going to stand here and pretend like this isn't a ton of money, because that is a lot you're spending on a professional machine, which we need to keep this in mind. This is not a prosumer machine. This is not a consumer machine. This is absolutely professional. This should not be in the hands of, you know, the common man, you know? And I know a lot of people, especially Super Saft, he posted something on Twitter, which he now deleted the comment because a lot of people got on his grill about it, where he's like, oh, if you can't afford it, then why are you talking bad about it? And it's like, no, it's not that. It's like, we have to be objective and, you know, at least try to be objective as possible, which is, we're not going to do that all the time, you know, because it's hard. We all have our own perspectives. We have our own opinions about things. And so he deleted the comment. But it brought up a lot of questions, because a lot of people were like, well, let's think about this. Like, even in terms of professional market, you know, it's, yes, in terms of people that are making movies and, you know, like, it seems like it's only meant for them, because even for most YouTubers, this is overkill. Like, this is extremely overkill for their workflows, because even an iMac Pro, a maxed out iMac Pro does their job perfectly fine. They don't need this thing. This thing is just it's just overkill. That's all it is. It's just super overkill. And even though, yes, some of my friends that have looked over all the parts and everything, they're like, bro, that's a $500 graphics card in that thing, and they want that much money for it? That's crazy. And I'm like, true. But I think there's a lot to offer, especially because this is the reason why I'm so torn about this, is because of what Jonathan Morrison did. Jonathan Morrison, if you guys know, he's obviously a big tech YouTuber, but he always does these reviews with these new Apple products that are considered pro products, you know? He always does a real review and testing them the way that they're supposed to be tested. And he did with the iPad Pro, which is why, for me, is where I always lean with the iPad Pro being in a healthy spot when it comes to shaping the audio engineering industry and making the workflow much easier for some people. And he did the same thing with the Mac Pro. Now, there's a big difference this time, especially when we talk about the Mac Pro or Mac OS in general, because Catalina, if you guys aren't familiar, Catalina has some stability issues with audio or audio recording or editing. It has some stability issues because there's some issues in Catalina that, you know, freak people out. So that's why Jonathan, you know, he was worried, because he's like, okay, how is this thing going to react? If we know Catalina has some stability issues, what is the state of audio with the Mac Pro? And so he did a video titled, "This 2019 Mac Pro Review is Different," because everyone else, as you can tell, just did a review talking about the specs, you know, unboxing it, you know, liking the look of it, you know, saying that they've used it for like they're editing their videos and things like that, and etc. Jonathan did something different. And this is where I say it's always torn, because it's always made me, I wouldn't say it didn't make me love Apple more, but it makes me be more aware of what you can get out of it when you actually push this hardware to its limits. And even then, they couldn't push this thing to its limits. They still had so much room to go. Like, they couldn't push it to its limits. And in the video, Jonathan was basically I wouldn't say editing, but he had some people come in and work on the Mac Pro to make music. They essentially were editing a song, and they've had some of the most talented individuals I've seen, like, because that's what Jonathan always does, is he brings some incredibly talented people in to work on these products. He did with Henny and Ken Lewis to work on the iPad Pro to make beats on the iPad Pro. And this one, he had Andrew Dawson and Jackson Foote, if I'm saying his last name correct. And obviously, if you guys know, Andrew Dawson is a 3-time Grammy Award-winning producer and mixer. And then also Jackson Foote is a songwriter, producer, and an artist. And then the artist that they had on was Julia Wolf. And then if you want to know her Instagram handle, it's Julia Wolf NYC. And I was just shocked watching it, because to me, it supports my idea that this thing is just way too much overkill. Like, that even on a professional level, you can't push this thing to its limits. Like, it's insane on how hard it is to push it to its limits. And I'm going to leave the video in the link in the description so you guys can see it for yourselves, because it's just masterclass work, like masterclass work. And this is obviously for y'all that are audio engineers or sound engineers. You guys are going to have a lot of fun watching this, because it's just incredible watching professionals go to work and make magic happen, like make something incredible. And it leads me to where I am now, where it's like I'm so torn, because on one hand, I do believe this thing is very overpriced and that it's not meant for the average consumer, that it's not meant for 99. Like, it's a very specific market, very specific. This isn't as, like, this is a gaming gaming laptops, like, yeah, it costs like $1,500, but students can use it, but also gamers can, like, it's not like that where it can have multiple uses. Like, this is a very specific market, and this is targeted specifically for professionals and only high level work that can be done. Because even on high level work, you're still not going to push this thing to its limits. Even Marques in his video said he still couldn't even push this thing to his limits. And Marques, if you guys know, Marques does a lot of his videos with 8K cameras. So even he wasn't able to push it. And that kind of is why I think Supersap erased that comment or deleted his tweet, to be honest, because he's like, okay, probably coming off a little bit ignorant here, But it's crazy to think about it, because this is not your typical workstation. This is something that's way overkill, that's just like top of the food chain. Like, this thing is a beast for making, obviously for people that are working on movies and putting together movies, obviously for people that are working on audio. Well, based on this, we can clearly see it's able to handle the workload, even though, yes, Catalina is still a little bit concerned. We're gonna be honest, Catalina is still a concern because it's Catalina. And it's crazy to think about, because it's like, you don't, like, obviously, yes, you don't need to spend so much money. You don't need to spend $52,000 to get a good machine, because Marques didn't even have a top of line version. Like, his capped out, I think he still had the 28 core CPU. He had 384 gigabytes of memory. I think he had the max graphics card as well. He had the 4 terabyte SSD, Afterburner, and it was like $33,000. So, obviously, depending on what you get, you get what you paid for, and I think it's crazy to think about it, because this is insane to think about. Because I think even my friend, me and Gilberto, we were talking about it, because Gilberto heard me when I talked about, when we talked about how much RAM this has. He's like, bro, I'm over here chilling with 16 gigabytes, and you're telling me this thing's got 1.5 terabytes? I was like, yeah, it's crazy, right? And he's like, what the hell? He's like, what the hell? But it kind of leads me to where I am, is like, it's so hard. And we haven't even talked about the Pro Display either, so let's actually go talk about that, because we haven't even talked about that thing, which I think when we talk about the Pro Display, we have a much different conversation. Because, yes, in terms of the industry leading, I do believe the Pro Display in its category, yes, it's industry leading, because specifically for what it's supposed to do, because obviously there's displays that are similar to it, but they're obviously like 3 times the price. And even Apple talked about it, and a lot of people agreed, because when we talked about it originally, we're like, yes, in terms of its competition, yes, it is industry leading. It's definitely the best option in its category for what it's used for. Because also, yes, in terms of affordability too, there's like, it's better than all the other displays that are in its category, or it's supposed to do what it does, and at the same time, it's also much cheaper by a good amount. And obviously, yes, we haven't talked about the Pro Display, because, $1,000 for a stand. They don't even give you the base mount adapter either. But even then, even if you bought all that, it's still cheaper than the other options that aren't as good. And I think, to me, Apple definitely did something great with the Pro Display XDR. I think it's a great idea. Like, yes, in terms of the stand thing, come on, guys. Like, you should have given them the stand for free. You're already spending like $6,000, because as you can see, there's actually 2 versions of it. So the $5,000 wasn't even that accurate. The standard glass, and then there's the Neo Texture glass. And, like, The Neo Texture Glass is, it starts at $5,999. The Protostay is $999. And then if you want the base amount, like blah, 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 et cetera, et cetera. But it's still cheaper than most of the competition, So where do I stand on this thing? I think for me, and I say this again, no matter the workload, and I think once we see like companies actually go out and buy this and make like, specifically like companies that, what they advertise it to be is like for people to make movies on it, or like work with like, I don't know how many files of audio and things like that. Like, it's still overkill for some reason. And even then, I think to me, I like the idea of the Mac Pro. We've been waiting for this thing for a long time. The Mac Pro, especially when the trash can design, a lot of people were waiting for the redesign and something better, and we waited at such a long time, which I agree. Apple definitely took a long time to make it. For sure, to think about it, to even upgrade it and, make this jump. But they obviously made they did what they said they were going to do. This is a professional machine. They're not saying this is for consumers. They're not saying that this is for the average Joe. They're not. The base model, we've already agreed. The base model, at this point, we've all agreed this thing is a ripoff. The base model, yes, it clearly is. You can get the same machine for much less, or you get a better deal from an iMac Pro. And to be honest, once we start going up to the higher versions or higher configurations, and if you want to use that terminology, we start messing with a beast. This is where you start poking something that's on a different level. And I think that's how we have to view it, is like this thing is just on a completely different level. We cannot compare this thing to the average computer that you and me have, like our gaming rigs. We cannot, because this thing will steamroll our builds. Like, I don't care how much of a PC you have. Like, this thing, for most people's workloads, for what you're going to do, it will steamroll a lot of people's personal rigs, because it's just insane. Like, and I know a lot of people, like a lot of my friends that are audio engineers, like they like working on Macs. They only work on Mac OS. And there's some that work on Windows. And, obviously they haven't had that much time to talk to me about it. And I know we eventually will, because it's a very interesting thing to talk about, especially because in terms of audio, obviously, like we mentioned, the stability with, Catalina is a very iffy thing, because, audio is, for most people, especially when you're working with audio, you're not working with pre-recorded files. Like, you're working, like you record the file on the software and then work with it right then and there. And even though for my case, it's always, I record everything, then work on it on my machine later. But you get the point, is that it's a very, very interesting time. And I think Apple did an incredible job with the Mac Pro. Do I think it's perfect? Absolutely not. I do not believe it's perfect. Do I believe that it should be as expensive as it is? Probably not. I think if anything, maybe like 20 grand cheaper, if anything, because they definitely went overboard with this. Like keep this in mind. Let's keep this in mind. I'm going to pull up the iMac Pro, and then I'm also going to pull up the 2016, or not the 2016, the new 16-inch MacBook Pro, because, yeah, a lot of people like making these comparisons. So I'm pulling out the iMac Pro, and I'm going to make a completely maxed out version. The maxed out version, this starts with an 18 core Intel Xeon W processor, caps out at 256 gigabytes of memory. Obviously, the graphics card is a Radeon Pro Vega 64. We also cap out at 4 terabytes of storage. We're looking at $14,299. We pull up the new MacBook Pro, and I'm going to pull out the 16-inch. I'm going to configure the big version, obviously. 64 gigabytes of memory, maxed out graphics card, 8 terabyte SSD, $6,99. Yeah, we're definitely looking at a big difference. And I've already stated this very clearly. When I think about the MacBook Pro, I like the idea of the MacBook Pro. I think for a consumer, well, not even consumers, like people that want to do content creation on something that's more minimal, something on the go, I think the MacBook Pro, the new 16-inch, is a great option, especially with what they fixed in terms of performance, what you're getting out of it. It's a great pickup. And for content creators, they're going to love this thing. They're going to buy a maxed out version. That's about, depending on your, sales tax in your state. Yeah, Definitely crazy, for sure. The iMac Pro, which is, the iMac Pro, $14,299. I recommend this for people that, like I said, for those people that are working with 8K footages and everything, I think this is a great pickup for them. When we go up to the Mac Pro, there's a reason why Apple charged so much they did, because this is not in the league of prosumer and consumer. This is way out of prosumer range. I don't care what anyone says. This is my opinion, and I'm being very clear about this. This is my opinion. There is no YouTuber that is going to use this machine to its fullest. I don't care what you're working with, what equipment you got. You will never push the maxed out Mac Pro to its limits. Not even a under, like, I wouldn't say under, but like a middle of the road spec version. You are not going to push that thing. You are not. You do not have the capabilities of pushing that thing and to justify its price. But I also get it's an investment. You also have to keep that in mind is most people that buy this equipment or that are going to buy the maxed out version, they're expecting this thing to last 10 years. Like they're thinking 10 years, they're thinking about how much money they're going to make off this thing, how much it improves their workflow and everything. And that's great. I think it's a fantastic idea because, that's smart. That's why you make these investments, because you're going to get money back as a result, like you spend, say you buy the maxed out version, maxed out, spend $53,000, depending on your sales tax, like let's say $53,000. You make movies, like you make a couple movies that make about, like, say over 120 something million each. You just made your money back by, I don't even know how many folds. This thing already paid for itself. The first movie you made on it made its money. Say if it's $1 billion movie, you just like made $1 billion. You get what I'm saying? Like in that sense, that's why I say in the terms of audio engineers, in the terms of, audio engineers, or specifically like people that are making movies, filmmakers, cinematographers, it's definitely going to make its money back for sure. Audio engineers, I think it'll be a little bit depending on, who's working on it. Obviously people that are making movies that are winning or making music that's multi-Grammy winners, I think they'll do fine and they'll probably make their money back, But I think for the average YouTuber and everything, they don't need this thing. This thing is way overkill. If anything, custom PCs or an iMac Pro, if you like using macOS, I think the iMac Pro is your best bet. And obviously for people that just like being more minimal and they do everything on a MacBook, I think a maxed out MacBook Pro 16-inch, perfect. And that's where I stand. Like I said, I'm also going to leave the link in the description for Jonathan's video because I think it's incredible. Like it's incredible to look at. I think it's stunning. It's it's eye-opening. It's incredible. And I applaud Jonathan for doing it because I like Jonathan. I really do. I appreciate his work. I appreciate him for what he is. A great cinematographer, great videographer, very talented individual, incredibly talented. And I appreciate that he does these reviews to show people like, hey, let's not do the norm and just unbox this thing, talk about specs, and give our opinions. No, let's actually put it to the test. Let's see if this thing can work. Let's see if this thing puts its money where its mouth is, and see if Apple's claims were true and actually push it. And I think Jonathan did a great job, like showing that they pushed this thing hard, and it still wasn't enough, And that's crazy to think about. You had two multi-Grammy award-winning producers literally push this thing to its limit, and it still wasn't enough to even touch not even 10% of this thing. That's insane. Like they couldn't even touch 10%. It's insane. And it's crazy to think about, guys. And let me know what you guys think. You can obviously send me like messages on Instagram, Twitter, whatever you have. You want to just talk to me about it or just like sit down, chat about it. Or if you want to hear more about this and, maybe we can get Juan back on the show or maybe somebody else, who knows? And let's get people to talk about it because I think it's a very interesting topic to talk about because it's big news, Right now it's definitely big because, like I said, everyone's been waiting for the Mac Pro. We've been waiting for such a long time and now we got it. The price is obviously very jarring, but the performance is incredible for what you're getting out of it. And I hope you guys liked today's episode. Yes, I know it is a little bit late, obviously, because of everything with moving back home for the winter break and, just figuring things out, sorting things out. But it's definitely been nice. I'll say that now. Obviously, I'll say this now. I'm very sorry for the whole last minute change thing. I wasn't expecting it. I was still expecting, the normal schedule. but it's okay. Like everything worked itself out, and we're just going to do it next week. So that's great. So obviously, I hope you guys come back and listen to next week's episode. Again, thank you guys so much for your continued love and support and coming back and listening. And, obviously, yes, at the time of this recording, there is a lot of stuff going on in the video game space. And I know I'm going to talk about it next week, or maybe next week or in the coming weeks. And there's a lot to talk about, guys. But until then, I love you guys to death. Have yourselves a wonderful weekend. Please be safe. Don't do anything dumb. I care about you guys so much because you guys are constantly supporting me. You're constantly coming back and listening. You're constantly sharing. You're constantly keep increasing my I don't know, my listener count or my audience count. I don't know how you want to say it. But you guys are incredible, and I love you guys to death for it. And thank you guys so much for everything. So until then, I'll see you guys next week. Bye, guys. Hey there. Thank you for listening to today's episode. I really appreciate it. Thank you guys so much for taking time out of your day and listening to today's episode. If you're interested in supporting the show, whether it be financially, clicking the follow button, or just sharing the episode, it all works for me, guys. Thank you guys so much for your time, and I love you guys to death.